Ah, the C64, one of my favorite old school computers ever. I grew up with it, and because of that, I've always loved the games on it. With great games, though, like Jumpman, there are bound to be some rather questionable games as well. I'm Professor Retro, and today we're going to look at 10 more bad Commodore 64 games. So in 1990, Jellicoe released a strange racing game called Cisco Heat into the arcades. The plot of the game is you play a hard-nosed cop who has to patrol the crime-ridden streets of San Francisco. However, you and your fellow officer did a tremendous job cleaning up the city, so crime was pretty much non-existent. So to keep you and your fellow officers busy, the police decided to close off half the streets and organize a cop versus cop racing. And as if that weren't dangerous enough, the department also decided to invite citizens and other motorists to get involved on the event as well. To add some obstacles you had to avoid as well as completely ignore public safety. Geez, this reminds me of the old movie Death Race 2000. You start out having to choose between two cars to drive, the classic Chevy model, which was powerful but slow, or a modern one which was fast but less powerful. Plus, you're racing against the clock, and if you don't reach a checkpoint or finish the race before the clock runs out, you are out of the race. The reception for the game was rather poor, with people saying the game never gave you a sense of speed or excitement during gameplay. So why did ImageWorks decide to port this already poor arcade game to microcomputers? Well, that is beyond me right now. So now let's look at the C64 version of the game. So, back when the game was first released to the Commodore 64, it advertised, take the wheel of a high-powered police car and race around the famous areas of San Francisco, which all flashed by with exciting realism. However, when you play, you never get what was promised. Your fellow cop cars racing against you all look the same, whether you're behind them or they're far in the distance, which basically ruins any sense of depth in the game. The sprite work is poor to say the least. The cop cars are all rectangular with an unused spot that was used for drawing the cars, I guess, on the screen, which caused blank spots to cut out of the background, plus the buildings look like they were used ASCII to create them, which doesn't create the so-called excitement that the box advertised. The gameplay is what some call juddery or shaky. Not to mention, this already makes the already shaky arcade version much better apparently. Those other cops and civilian drivers just seem to jump out at you, which makes trying to pass them almost near impossible. The music and sound is just as bad. The theme music is just annoying and made me turn the sound off to be spared from it. Don't believe me? Here, take a listen. All over, Cisco Heat is as bad can be, with shaky gameplay, subpar plot, music that sounds so bad you're better off turning off the sound, and lazy, sloppy graphics. If you want a horrible racing game, this is the game for you. But if you want a good racing game, stay away from Cisco Heat. Now, I have a theory about movie-based games that can either be hit or miss. Let's look at one such example of a miss, and that is Highlander. Released in 1986 for the ZX Spectrum, C64, and the Amstrad PC, and created by Canvas and published by Ocean. The basic plot is you play as Connor McCloud, and you have to basically battle in sword fights against three opponents. First one, your mentor, Ramirez, then Fixer, and then finally Kurgan, where the loser gets beheaded. That is basically it. Nothing less, nothing more. So let's start with the gameplay, which is clunky at best, making the gameplay rather trite. The controls are rather unresponsive and clunky that almost makes the game virtually unplayable. One of my favorite quotes from a review of the game came from Zap64, and I quote, "They say the game is slow and boring, with blocky graphics and unresponsive controls. They bluntly summarize the game a whole as a film tie-in ripoff with nothing vaguely original or even interesting." That says a lot on a system that has a lot of stellar games for it. To me, the game is one big letdown, and like I said, a miss when it came to movie-based games. Let's look at the title screen rather bleak to me with an underwhelming dead person, and a Highlander written on in some fancy font, and the ocean logo, not sure who Simon is at all. Basically, all you're doing is sword fighting. Now, I like fighting games such as Mortal Kombat, or my personal favorite, DOS Fighter, One Must Fall. Both are great games, but Highlander on the C64 looks like someone asked their kid to draw the sprites with simple pixel art program, and what he or she created was put into the game. The gameplay is indeed clunky and boring. For a game based on the hit movie, you would think the game would have excitement and some gameplay that reflects the excitement of the movie, not a pixelated mess with unresponsive controls and piss poor graphics. If you want a really bad movie adaptation, this game is for you. For those of you who want the excitement and fun, get yourself a copy of the movie and some popcorn. One of the best TV shows back in the 1980s was Knight Rider, a show about a guy who drives a high-tech supercar named Kit and fights bad guys. No one would think a game based on that would have the same excitement as the show, right? Well, instead, we got this. So first off, you're greeted by a rather boring screen asking you to choose from 5 different types of missions. 1 random, 3 shoots them on, and the last destroying an entire city. Wow. For a game supposedly based on a TV show where the lead actor is a good guy, you sure have some rather interesting choices, all the while the TV theme song plays in the background. Next you're taken to yet another boring screen that looks similar to the map screen of Oregon Trail. Really, you copy something from one of the most successful educational games ever made. What is next? You copy the gameplay from Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? Kid talks to you with a text at the bottom of the screen that tells you where to go, and if you don't follow what he says, you then waste time. Yes, this game has a time limit. What is with time limits on games these days? Once all that is done, you finally get to the game. This all reminds me of waiting in line at an attraction at Universal Studios Florida. You wait in line to see a movie about the ride you're about to go on, and then you wait in another line to actually go on the ride. Now we finally get to the meat of the game, driving Kid and fighting bad guys. What the hell am I looking at here? The graphics look like Ocean did yet another let the kids design the graphics moment. And the gameplay isn't much better. Mostly you drive Kid and shooting at helicopters that drop what is supposed to be missiles at you. Not to mention the sound and music of the game are horrible. The sound is ear-piercing, and it sounds like someone went to someone dying horribly and said, "Here, can you please record your death scream for our newest game?" The aiming is bad. Kit aims at the helicopters for you and tells you the distance, which is a measly 250. The controls, if you want to call them that, are atrocious. You get no feeling of speed at all as the background goes past you like a picture slideshow. Now once you reach your destination, you are then taken to a top-down perspective, which to me looks like, again, someone told their kid here use MS Paint to try to copy the look of Metal Gear Solid, which is an awesome PS1 game, by the way. Come to think of it, for a game based on a hit TV show from the 80s, you don't even get to see how they made Kid from the outside, and the sprite work from Michael Knight makes him almost unrecognizable. So let's wrap this up. Knight Rider on the Commodore 64 is a giant mess of bad gameplay, graphics that look like a 10-year-old did it, poor sprite work, and music so bad that it's ear-piercing. If you like all that, then this game is right up your alley. However, if you're expecting an action-packed game with a supercar and high-paced gameplay, well, then stay away from Knight Rider. Here we have another arcade port. I wonder why arcade ports were big back then, but who knows? Why they always seem to look like crap on the Commodore 64, and Line of Fire is no exception to that. Line of Fire was released by Sega in 1989 as an arcade game and was praised for its pseudo 3D effect and the cockpit cabinet. However, when it was ported to the Commodore 64, that's when the game took a nosedive. So you play as an agent of a two-man team who has to go behind enemy lines to take down a terrorist organization with a huge arsenal of weapons. Now, even though the arcade version was praised, the C64 port was not so much. Zap64 has stated that even though the 3D attempt was impressive, the lack of enemies on the screen and the difficulty curve was horrible, with easy levels to go on and harder levels that do the same. My take on Line of Fire is it's a mess of a game. The gameplay is horrible and reminds me of a bad version of Operation Wolf with a bad attempt at 3D. Now, I know what you're going to say here. Trying to do 3D graphics on a C64 is near impossible, but hey, they could have done better. The gameplay looks awful as well. I mean, the background goes past you like it's trying to find a hyperdrive, and enemies are little to non-existent. If you want to play this game, find the arcade version and stay away from the Commodore 64 version. Intergalactic Cage Match. Wow, what a mouthful right there. Our next game is Intergalactic Cage Match, a wrestling-style fighting game. So why is this game so bad? Well, to simply put it, from lemon64.com, the graphics are bad, the sprites are bad, the animation is bad, the sound is bad, the music is really bad, the gameplay is extremely bad. That's a lot said. Let's see why this was all said. First off, the graphics are just plain bad, with a 3D-like cage match with alien spectators. The sprite work is awful, and the animation is just as bad. Sometimes you try to do a move and wonder what the hell you just did. The few characters you face all have the same boring moves with no special moves at all. It is a wonder why people even played this game. The controls are as responsive as a rock, and the scoring system is buggy as hell. Now you can play one player or two player. However, the AI in the one player mode is not even there. I mean, you press a button to move and all you do is flex. Well, the other player just takes advantage of the moment and wails on you. The music, if you want to call it that, is so bad, it'll make you want to reset your Commodore 64, which, in this case, might be a good idea. Basically, Intergalactic Cage Match is a mess of bad graphics, bad gameplay, god-awful music, and unresponsive controls. The only redeeming part of the game is the graphics on the intro screen. However, that all changes once the music starts. Mankey. What the hell name is that for a game? So basically you play as a gorilla who has to try to collect keys, eggs, and grain. And once you do that, you have to get Mankey to the toilet to go to the next level. What the hell? You have to make sure Mankey has to take a dump after you collect the items. What does he have to do? Eat it as he collects it? So, at the start of the game, you're greeted with a cyan screen with a gorilla at the top and the word Mankey underneath him. Once you press the I key, you're at the game to take to another screen with white lighting telling you basics of the game. One review I read said the instructions should have read, guide Mankey through each level collecting keys, eggs, and grain. Avoid chicks and other nasties and don't fall off the platforms. Collect all keys, 6 more eggs to gain more points. Collect grain only if Mankey's skin is white. And the second paragraph, when the toilet wall opens, guide Mankey to the toilet, then sit on it and move on to the next level. You must make it before the time runs out. Good luck! So the graphics are really poor, with one person saying one of the enemy sprites looks like it was ripped from another game called Chucky Egg. The one major flaw most people have said for the gameplay is the jumping mechanics, plus the animation is awful as well. It literally looks like and plays like an unfinished game. One person even said that if the software stores were pitched Mankey, they would have said, no thank you. Overall, Mankey is an unfinished mess with bad jumping, graphics that look ripped from another game, and bad sound design. Street Gang to me looks like a cross between a platformer and a beat-em-up game, but let's look at why Street Gang is one of the worst games the C64 had to offer. So upon the start of the game, you're greeted with what looks like a decent title screen and some decent music. However, once the game starts, it all goes downhill. First off, the graphics are poor and the animation is just as bad. The basic plot of the game is you just push your way through enemies on the street. However, with lack of variety, the game gets boring fast. Gameplay is awful, with one person saying that when you die, instead of having you start where you left off, you have to go all the way back to the start of the game. Plus, the collision detection is weak, making the game tedious to play. I have to say, if you can't bother to allow players to save their progress, why should players take the time to play your game over and over and over again? To me, Street Gang needs to be thrown to an actual gang war, be shot on sight with bad collision detection, god-awful graphics, and animation, with the only redeeming part of the game is the music on each level. What do you get when you steal graphics from a Star Wars game and have a developer that has no musical or artistic abilities? You get Dark Star. Hello. Now, the plot is almost a complete ripoff of Star Wars. You fly in a tunnel and have to destroy the Dark Star. If that doesn't say Star Wars ripoff, I don't know what does. All the while trying to avoid cannons and ships. One thing, though, that seems like a good idea but is executed very poorly are alternate routes to go. But there's no real direction to go. Basically, you live and die and remember for the next time you play the game, if you play the game again at all. So once you start the game, you immediately end up dying quick. At least give us a press fire button to start the game. The game is your basic vertical space shooter. Once you start playing, you see in both sides of gray areas. Those are borders, and if you touch them, instant game over. Not to mention there are other ships out there that are out to get you. If they hit you, instant game over. And if you get hit by a bullet fire, guess what happened? Yep, if you said instant game over, you are correct. Do we see a pattern here? It is if the game wants you not to play it. With the instant game overs, a health bar would be very helpful, giving players a chance to get further. The enemies are birds that swoop down at you while others shoot at you from side to side. And others hone on your position quick and get into your path, which makes you get hit, and guess what? Instant game over. Not to mention they appear randomly, which makes it even harder to play. The gameplay chugs along, and the bland background just makes it even worse. Not to mention some of the other paths are narrow, making it hard to steer to the next safe area. Also, for reasons, a stray bullet appears out of nowhere, which doesn't help you at all. The graphics are passable at best, except for the background, which looks like it was made in Petsky by a 10-year-old. Now, most space shooters have a smooth scrolling that makes them move along at good pace. This is not the case for Dark Star. The bad scrolling makes the game's pace chug along and along and along. One thing to mention is that Dark Star was made with the Game Creator engine, and yes, some games made with it can be good. Now, if Dark Star was any good, I would have forgiven its origin. So, Dark Star is riddled with issues and flaws, like bad backgrounds, bad scrolling, and horrible sound design. So altogether, just avoid it. So, Jungle Story is your basic avoid stuff game. You play as a boy who is running in the jungle, avoiding snakes, elephants, tigers, and coconuts thrown at you by monkeys. So what's really so bad about that? Well, first off, the graphics and sprite work are absolutely atrocious. With the sprite of the boy looking like it was made with just one sprite. The whole game looks like someone's class project created with a half an hour before it was due. The music and sound effects are not even possible. I mean, some of the game for the Atari 2600 have better sound effects and background music. So let me summarize it with words from lemon64.com. First, it would be a lie to say the graphics could have been better. Next, the music sounds like Mary Had a Little Lamb being played by ghosts of a refried beans. The gameplay is non-existent. Overall, it's an utter piece of crap that'll attract many flies around your monitor. So for the number one spot, we have the results of what happens when a jailbreak happens in Springfield. Chief Wiggins sits and eats a donut. But what fun is that? So we add you roam the streets as a cop, shooting prisoners on sight. Not to mention that the original version of the game was an arcade side-scrolling shooter, so how did this translate to the Commodore 64? Well, the only redeeming quality of this game again is the title screen. First off, the graphics look way too murky and washed out, but the player sprite is passable except for its animation, which flickers a lot, making you look like you're trying to be Fred Astaire tap dancing. The gameplay is just bad, with it only being able to move 90 degrees, which sadly only allows you to shoot up, down, left, and right, which makes your weak spot diagonal. The hit detection is god-awful. Bullets you fire sometimes pass right through the enemy, but when they fire at you, they're spot on, and when you get hit and die, you don't even get a cool death animation. You get a basic boring message that says, "They got me." Now, I should also mention that the arcade version has buses and vans of escaped prisoners you have to contend with, so does the C64 version have the same? Nope. All you get is the same prisoner sprite over and over again. So overall, Jailbreak is a mess of repetitive music, no sound effects, bad graphics, and sprites that repeat over and over. A poor death message that reminds me of the ending of Ghostbusters on the NES, with two only redeeming qualities being the music, even though it is repeated, and the title screen. So there you have it, 10 more bad Commodore 64 games, all with the same complaints: bad graphics, horrible gameplay, and some with rather awful sound design. So what does this all tell us? Well, there's a system that has over 1,000 titles for it. There are some gems, and there are some just plain piles of pure dog crap that you want to pick up with a pair of tongs and toss them in a fire to never be seen again. So if there are any that I missed, let me know in the comments below. I might put them on a subscriber submission list for another video. Until then, I'm Professor Retro, reminding you to hit that like button, match that subscriber button, and ring that bell so you get heads up when the next video is ready. Until then, peace out and game on, and stay frosty.